Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking time out of your day to join us. I'm John, co-founder of Userback. And first up, just some housekeeping. Can I please ask you to let me know that you can see my screen and hear me clearly? Just in the chat, if possible. Excellent. Thanks very much. Secondly, we do have Matt and Lee here with me to help answer any questions that you have throughout. There is a Q&A section. If you can please pop your questions into there. Anything that they don't answer about what we're talking about today, I'll try to address at the end. We do have 5 or so minutes at the end for Q&A. So today we'll be covering off some best practices on managing feedback with your clients, some tips and tricks on using Userback with your design projects, and how to streamline client feedback, managing revisions and approvals. Before Userback, I was actually in a role working closely with agencies, designers, and marketers, and I specifically remember working on a website project with a team where there were several stakeholders involved. However, I was effectively the main point of contact. We submitted a fairly detailed brief, though there was some content and design elements that were open to interpretation. So there was a little bit of creative freedom allowed. The marketing team and creative team, they wasted no time in getting content completed and designed into WordPress, in that more than 80% of the work was finished before anyone from my side was brought back into that conversation. The end result was the initial 80% of that project being completed very quickly. And the final 15 to 20%, it took much longer, which meant the project was delivered outside of the agreed timeframes. Not only for that project, we were actually using email, we were using phone calls and in-person meetings to collaborate. But because of the lack of regular involvement from the marketing and creative team and myself, that project was it was simply challenged. That's probably the best way that I can put it. And given that I'd worked with other designers and other agencies in the past, looking over the projects that they were doing with their clients, I understood how they worked and what it was going through this process that I'd just been through firsthand. And I realized that the best designers and agencies, they work collaboratively, and they take their clients along a journey throughout the design process. In particular, it was how they managed client feedback that helped them complete successful client projects and keep their clients happy. So based on that, I do have 3 things that you can do as best practices to ensure your projects are completed on time and clients stay happy throughout. So my first best practice tip is to make sure feedback is incorporated through each and every step of the design process, and ensure the design review and the approval step has an equal weighting in your process compared to all of the steps. Ideally, try to understand exactly who each stakeholder is, whether they're internal or external, and understand how to manage each of those stakeholders appropriately. Sharing early and sharing often is the best advice for setting the client up for success. And I know that many people might disagree with that depending on who their client is, but as the experts in the room, you will know what's best for your client and what cadence is required for the projects that you're working on with them. Speaking of setting clients up for success, once you've worked out a rock solid design process, which I'm sure all of you already have, make sure the client understands each step and the importance each step plays throughout the process. If you use any software whatsoever during your design process, be completely transparent with the client and explain the software and the role that it plays throughout the process. If the client needs to use any of that software with you at any point, run a demo and explain the benefits to them and how it will help achieve a better outcome for their design project. As mentioned, creative review is a huge part of the design project workflow. And that means that with the right approach, design collaboration software is absolutely worth it, as it allows you to save time and money in the end. You'll be able to finish the client projects faster, and you'll have an instrument that will help you coordinate the whole process and make it more efficient. By implementing a structured process for design approval and setting the right expectations with your client, you'll save hours. And on average, from what we're seeing when talking with our clients, who are agencies and designers and marketers, we're seeing up to a day per project saved. And it's actually becoming a longer saving or a bigger saving, because the biggest culprit these days is video calls, screen sharing, and clients still love long phone calls. They send countless emails with printed and scanned notes. And finally, comments coming through randomly without any proper context, leaving you to figure out what to update in the design. Having a tool to help with design review will help break down communication barriers, as sometimes designers use industry jargon and language that clients typically may not understand. So using a tool for the design review process will help to set a level playing field to connect your design team directly with the client. It honestly doesn't matter how you implement a review and approval process, as long as it's structured and all of the review feedback is centralized. You can do this using spreadsheets. You can use a Trello board or a feedback tool like Userback. But by centralizing feedback, you'll save yourself the administration headache of piecing all the phone calls, the meetings, and the emails together. And nothing's worse than trying to decipher coffee stained post-it notes all over your desk. So what are some things that you can do for creating a good review process? Well, firstly, I think ensuring the client understands how many rounds of feedback or versions are allowed. Now, having worked with agencies and designers before, they've always been upfront and said, for this project, you're allowed 5 changes on this design, and we'll go through two rounds of changes. So it's important to do that, because I have seen clients in the past, they suggest one change and ask to see what the design looks like after that one change. And then it's another change and another change, and that's endless. So setting the expectation up front to let the client know we have 5 changes allowed, and there's 3 rounds of 5 changes till the final approval is required. The next is giving clients very clear instructions on how you would like the client to give you feedback. So whether that's, please place all feedback here, and this is how I would like you to structure it, or please give feedback around these elements right now, because we're not looking at content at this point in time. Next would be to set clear expectations on when you require feedback for each version. So setting a weekly milestone once a version has been provided from first through to last, and say, please take the time over the next week, and by Tuesday, please have all of your feedback collected so that we can move on to the next step, upload a new version, and move forward from there. Which ties into setting a due date for final approval. No doubt you've agreed on a time frame with a client, and I completely understand that design projects can sometimes be blown out. But having, once you've uploaded the first design for review, having a due date for final approval is really important, even if it's stretched by a day or two either way. That's important to let the client know that at this point in time, this is when we need to move forward and implement that design. So keeping all your collaboration within the tool that you're using, and really try not to revert back to phone or email, is really important. So if you don't stick to your process, if you're using a tool to collect centralized feedback, the feedback could get out of hand, or it could get lost. So if a client calls up and they say, hey, I've been looking at the design and I'd really like to change these items, can you please look into that for me? I would suggest, if possible, to say, yep, that's okay, I'm happy to look at that. Can you please put that into this process, insert process here, whether that's into a spreadsheet or Trello or Userback. So once your approval has been granted, just do a final check with the client to ensure they're happy for you to move forward. Nothing worse than it's been handed over to the final stage of the process, and the client comes back a few days later and says, "Oh, actually, I don't like that one thing. Can you please update it?" So just a final check with the client to say, yes, 100% happy. We are definitely moving to the next step. Ultimately, your goal is to keep the client happy and deliver on their project and not run over time, which could delay other client projects that you have lined up. The reality is, when working with clients, there can sometimes be an initial unwillingness to accept new ways and methods of work. And that's usually based on some misconceptions, and design approval is not an exception to that at all. If we get the design approval part of the process wrong, there is a huge risk of miscommunication and dragging down the project, which means you're spending more time and money on the project than necessary. So let's jump into Userback, and we'll run through a couple of ways that you can help avoid that using Userback. So here we are. I'm in my Userback account, and I'm actually just in the account settings under the branding tab. And the reason I'm starting here is based on one of the best practices, which is running your client through the software that you use to complete the design project. And by setting up your branding within Userback, this, I guess, helps give your client a little bit more comfort around the tools that you're using. And within Userback, you can brand the notification emails. So when your client receives notification emails from our system, they'll be receiving it from with your branding associated with that. So they know that, oh, that's the tool that we're using to provide feedback, and my agency uses that. I'm comfortable with that software. Additionally, within the feedback viewer, you can also add a logo. So when your client goes to view the design and they're in the viewer, they can see that your branding is present there. So let's jump into the designs menu. So within the designs menu, you can upload different types of designs, and that ranges from video, images, PDF documents, or you can also scrape a full website if something is live or on staging and you need the client to go through and mark up the website. In this example, however, I'm going to upload an image design. So here we are, we have our version 1 design. And this is what it looks like from your end as a Userback user. Now, from here, once your design is uploaded into Userback, it's very easy to share this with your clients. So from here, you would simply click the share button up on the top right and simply provide this link to the client. Now, you can also type in an email address for your client here and send the link directly to them, and add a message as well. And what we find working really well when sharing the link via email using this share dialog is that this is where you can start to provide context around how you would like to the client to provide feedback. You can add a message in here and say, "Hi, here's the first version of the design. Can you please go through and use the tools available to provide feedback on it?" So once you've gone ahead and shared that with the client, if we just step out very quickly and head to the people menu, you can actually invite your clients directly into Userback. And the importance of doing that as a client is that this allows you to set up that approvals process. By having your clients with a direct access to your Userback account and selecting their specific project, they'll be able to log in, see their project, see their designs. They won't see any other client designs or any other feedback within your account. And this is where you can select a client later on to approve a design. So now that we're back inside the design, when the client is going through and providing feedback, they'll have access to all of the familiar annotation tools that you would have using our Userback feedback widget. So down on the bottom, they have the highlight tool, an arrow, and comment. So they can come through, draw a box around something, provide a comment. And then they can pin comments throughout the design. And once they've done that, you'll receive notifications that those comments have been added so that you can progress to the next stage, which is adding a new version. From here, if there's some things that are open to interpretation, you can collaborate with the client directly within Userback by replying to the client and saying, actually, the reason why we've done it this way is because of A, B, and C, or absolutely, we can change that. So you can have conversations to keep everything in one place so that comments aren't taken out of context. You can add attachments to comments. So you may add an image back in here and say, can you please check this image? We'll use this icon instead. The client can then reply back and say, that's great, please use that icon. Speaking of long phone calls, screen sharing, and video calls, one thing that can be quite useful to, I guess, comfort the client in that sometimes clients or people generally like to speak through things and how they feel about something. You can actually tell the client that if they have something quite detailed or lengthy to say, they can use the record video function. So by clicking the record video function and sharing, it will share the screen. They can talk through the design directly. And once you have a video of the design and the client talking, that conversation is recorded and it's also stored within this feedback as well. So you can go into this feedback, into this design feedback and view that video. So now that we've got some feedback into this design, I'm going to upload another version of this design. So we simply click the plus button down the bottom and I select the new version. And once that version has been uploaded, we now have two versions within this design. So we have version 1 and version 2. So these versions, to make it easier for the client, they can be renamed. And the version 2 as well. So once the client you've gone through and you've progressed through all of the client feedback, and this is the final version for their approval, you've marked all of their comments as complete. The next step is going and requesting for their approval. So to do that, all you'll do is you'll go into the share menu of the feedback and select the request approvals tab. And from there, you'll simply select the approver for this feedback. So from here, you can directly invite a client. But if you have your client in here already, you can select them as an approver, and you can also select to notify them via email. So they'll receive an email saying, can you please approve this design? And once you've done that, this design is now pending approval. And what that looks like for the client when they go into their account, they'll have, instead of a pending icon down on the bottom left, this will be an approve button, and there'll be a dialog that will pop up when they click that saying, just confirming you're looking to approve this design. Once a design has been approved, what that looks like in your designs menu is similar to this. So we have a design here, it's been approved, and it was approved by the client. So that's, I guess, the process of uploading designs, sharing it with clients, collaborating, and requesting approval. And from here, going live with it makes going live with a project, if it's a web design, much easier, because it's easy to transition the client from the designs part of the product. They've collaborated, they've made suggestions, and they've used the Userback to get to the final stage of the mock-up or the design, and then moving to the live site using the annotation tools on the live site. It makes it much easier to do that because the tools are familiar at that point. So that's everything that I'd like to run through with you today. I do have about 5 to 10 minutes of question time if there are any questions. So I'm just going to open up the Q&A section right now, and I'll read through those and see. Okay, there are a couple of questions which I'm happy to run through now. So the first question is that I uploaded 2 designs, and why is only one design shown? So inside the design, we have it's one, I guess, one project for this client design project, which is a site design, and we have 2 versions of that design. So we have version 1 and we have version 2, and it might be not be very clear, but they're slightly different on the below fold section of the design. So version 1 and version 2, and you would progress through the versions. So when a client or you log into the Userback account and you load up this design, they'll automatically see the latest design version. So you can always come back in and you can always go back to the previous version. So we have another question with regards to revoking and disabling the link and the client account. So my recommendation for that would be, once the project has been finished with the client, to simply remove them as a user. And that way, when they go to log in, they'll simply won't have access to that. The other suggestion I would make is with sharing feedback. There are options to make the feedback publicly available and comments public as well. So I would recommend turning those settings off as well. So another question with respect to showing past projects to the client and how do we hide those? My recommendation with that would be to create a new project potentially within Userback for each new client project. If you work on a lot of projects with a client, I would, in that case, in the project access part of our product, remove the client's project access, create a new project for their new design project, and give them access to that. So that way they won't have access to previous projects and only have access to the current projects. Have another question with respect to using other tools such as Figma to design websites and create wireframes. Is there any way to connect Figma to Userback like we do with websites? At this stage, no, there isn't a way to directly connect Figma into Userback. However, it is something that we are looking at in terms of building out integrations to other design products such as Figma. So we do still have another couple of minutes for questions if there are any. Okay, so there is one other question with respect to branding, and that is that when notifications emails are being sent from Userback, what email address do they come from? And in the branding menu, you can set up the sender email. So you can set your email address in the branding to have it sent via your sender name and the sender email of your choice. Okay, it doesn't look like there's any other questions coming through. I'm happy to stay here for the next 5 to 10 minutes. If anyone has any further questions or would like to talk to me directly, I'm happy to wait around.